What up and welcome back to Mean Joe Video, where we celebrate the classics and lesser known gems. I'm Mean Joe Grizzly, your humble video store clerk and curator of the classics. And today we are going to be continuing our journey through the Friday the 13th franchise with an entry that promises a new dimension of terror. That's right, in this episode we are going to be going into the realm of 3D with Friday the 13th Part 3, 3D. Part 3 picks up the day after the events of Part 2 and is a milestone entry in the franchise because it features a more intimidating Jason that has his look more fully realized when he dons his signature hockey mask. So let's dust off the old VCR, pop in the tape, throw on your 3D glasses, and head back to Crystal Lake in 3D. Taking place the day after the events of Part 2, Chris Higgins and her friends take a trip to a cabin near Crystal Lake. But the weekend getaway soon turns into terror when an injured Jason Voorhees emerges for another killing spree. So after the success of Part 2, Frank Mancuso Jr. was given a choice. He could be a co-producer on a film from another genre, or he could produce his own film. So he decided to produce the sequel to Friday the 13th Part 2. There were a lot of concepts thrown around. One in particular had Amy Steele's character Jenny being committed to a mental institution, and the facility being infiltrated by Jason, where he would kill off patients and staff alike trying to get to Jenny. Another concept was Jenny would go off, learn self-defense, become this more hardened character, go back to college, and then one day find Paul's rotting corpse in her dorm room. So that sends her on a crusade to stop Jason once again, with fellow survivor Ted joining the fray. And although I think that the first concept completely rips off Halloween 2, which would be just another egregious ripoff of another franchise, but I think it would be kind of cool to see Jason venturing into another setting like a hospital, or even the other concept where him being on a college campus. I find that to be a pretty fascinating idea, and I think it would be pretty damn cool. It would kind of be cool if like a fan would go out there and make a movie on this, because I would definitely watch it. But without a fully realized script, Amy Steele would decline to offer, and it would be a decision that she would go on to regret. Frank Mancuso Jr. would bring back Steve Miner to direct, and he ultimately wanted to get Ron Kurtz to come back, but Ron Kurtz declined, saying that he didn't want to be known as the Friday the 13th writer. So he would bring on Martin Kittrosser and Carol Watson to come in and write the script. But ultimately, they wasn't really satisfied with how the script was written. So the script would ultimately be revised and rewritten by Petro Papacies, who would also go uncredited in that role. So after meeting with his father, Frank Mancuso Jr. and him would ultimately decide to shoot the film in 3D as a way to draw in a bigger audience and to help out theater attendance at the time. So then the cast was gathered and filming would begin, and the movie will be released a little over a year later on August 13th, 1982. And just like with the first two films, I seen this on the Dusk Till Dawn Friday the 13th Marathon on Monster Vision with Joe Bob Briggs. And for the longest time, this was my favorite in the franchise. I absolutely loved this movie. And over time, it has slipped a little bit, and I do think that Part 2 is superior, but it's still one of my favorites. As far as the cast goes, this time around, it's almost as good as Part 2's cast. There are a good bit of lovable characters, but there are some not so much. Starting off, you have Larry Zerner, who plays Shelly. Shelly is the comedic aspect of this movie, like there is with every single Friday the 13th film. And he is your typical horror nerd that wants people to like him, but he just does it in very unconventional means, and it ends up pissing people off. He often sets up his friends by trying to get them to discover his dead body and how it's been murdered in certain ways, where he'll just take stuff out of this big makeup case that he has and just put makeup on himself and make himself look like that he just got murdered, scaring the shit out of his friends. And I love Shelly. I know that that is a hot take, and a lot of people call this like one of the most annoying characters in the franchise, but in my opinion, he's just one of us. He's one of us that just matured a little bit slower, if that makes any sense. He's just that likable loser, and for me, he is one of the franchise's best characters. Then we have our lovable couple of Andy and Debbie, played by Jeffrey Rogers and Tracy Savage. And this is another good example of a good couple in the franchise, and their dynamic is a little bit different because their chemistry kind of tells us that they've been together for a while, so they're kind of used to each other's bullshit and kind of play off each other's strengths and weaknesses and stuff. And it's just good to see they feel real comfortable together and they really come off as a genuine couple. Whereas other couples in the franchise have kind of come off as like really hot and heavy and really all over each other and stuff. These two, they're expecting a baby, and it gets lost in translation because the dialogue is very subtle. It only gets mentioned like twice, but there is a few times where we hear that, hey, we're having a baby. One time she gets, Tracy Savage's character, Debbie, gets asked if she wants a beer. She's like, yeah, only for a few seconds later to say, nah, I think I won't have that beer. Or, hey, I'm pregnant, I can't smoke that joint, and stuff like that. So it just added a different dynamic, and they're both very lovable characters as well. Then you have Chris Higgins, played by Dana Kimball, and she is our final girl for this entry. And I know that Amy Steele is the fan favorite, but I've got to say that when it comes to giving Jason the business and fighting back, Dana Kimball kills it. And she actually has a tie to Jason in this movie, where years prior she ran away from home and she was attacked by Jason. And there's a little bit of muddy water there because it's kind of implied that she was sexually assaulted by Jason, but it's never confirmed. But just that Jason attacked her and she all of a sudden blacked out and woke up in her bed and has been dealing with the trauma ever since. And that was going to be more heavily implied that she was sexually assaulted, but Dana Kimball really fought Steve Miner on that and said that it was a little bit too far, and I kind of have to agree with her. So ultimately, that part of her character in the script was revised and left up to interpretation by the audience. And that little extra backstory to her and that connection to Jason raises the stakes a little bit and gives us a different conflict that kind of puts these two on a collision course and makes her different from all the other victims. This, along with her just flat out fighting Jason like hell, is one of the reasons why I feel like she might be one of the most underrated final girls in the franchise. Because right now, if I was doing a ranking, Chris would be probably in the top 3, top 2, maybe even number 1 in the franchise as far as final girls who made smart decisions against Jason and final girls who just took it to Jason's ass when he was after them. And with all of my horror movies, I love final girls that are not just helpless victims. I like ones that fight. So ones that really fight back and actually not to kill her off guard and stuff and actually get one over on him. That's something that I really like in my horror films. So to me, Chris is definitely one of those final girls that I think really needs to be mentioned more often. As I said before in the intro, this is the first time we get a more fully realized design of Jason, and this is also the first time that we get a Jason that is absolutely intimidating as far as size goes. He's played by German-born stuntman Richard Brooker, and he really gives off that physical presence that is associated with Jason. Whereas actors before him that had portrayed the character, Warrington Gillette was 6'1", but he's only in one scene where he flies through the window and grabs Jenny and pulls her through at the end in the dream sequence. And then you have Steve Dash, who plays Jason most of the movie, and he's only 5'10". So those two never really were intimidating to me, but this, Richard Brooker's Jason, is 100% the first time we get a big, intimidating Jason. But I will say that this one also comes off as a slow, lumbering, clumsy Jason, kind of like the one in part 2, only I do believe Steve Dash was a little more active and moved a little bit better, but Brooker's version of Jason just kind of lumbers along like a big lug, and it's not necessarily a detriment to the character because he is still intimidating and the size 100% makes up for it. And this time Jason comes off with a different look altogether. Like, he has a completely different outfit. You don't see his face until the very end of the movie, and it is 100% different. And that kind of leads me back to what I was saying about the dream sequence truly being a dream sequence, because in the beginning of the movie, this movie picks up with Jason getting up, pulling the machete out and throwing it on the floor, and then the movie commences, and the dream sequence is never revisited. It's never brought back up. And I kind of feel like this is explained a little bit better on how he gets this look, because there is a scene in the beginning where he is stalking this like country store owner, and out behind their store is a clothesline with clothes. And I'm thinking that that's where he got his clothes. At least that's my headcanon. And this look with the green shirt and the kind of beige work pants and boots would kind of be his signature look for at least this film and the next film. And for me, the look of Jason that is most synonymous with the character. But either way, this is probably one of my top 3 Jason designs. The initial face design of Jason was made by the legendary Stan Winston, and he gave Jason more of a monstrous look. But Frank Mancuso Jr. thought that the look was too monstrous, and he left it up to the head special effects artist Douglas J. White to make a look that fall more in line with previous designs. However, Frank Mancuso Jr. also felt like the face needed to be covered until a big reveal at the end, and he absolutely hated the burlap sack look. So the story goes that there was a table full of masks, and on this table was a hockey mask because there was people on the set that were really big hockey fans, and for some odd reason a hockey mask ended up there. And ultimately somebody chose that mask and put it on Richard Brooker. And Frank Mancuso Jr. loved it. And again, no one knows really who did it. A lot of people claim that they did it, from someone like a production hand to even someone who was just there being the on-site medic. It just made absolutely no sense, and no one really can claim it because no one truly knows. But it ultimately been one of the best decisions ever made in this franchise because it gave us our signature Jason Voorhees. I thought it was a good job for Steve Miner to keep Jason in obscurity, keep him in the shadows, and never show his face until the big reveal at the end. But I felt like it was even better when he actually gets his hockey mask. And he obtains his hockey mask because Shelley is playing a prank on Catherine Parks' character Vera, where he puts on a wetsuit, has a spear gun, and jumps up out of the water with this hockey mask on, scaring the hell out of her. Also pissing her off and causing Shelley to storm off in rage. And he's killed off screen, and then Jason dons the mask himself. So when he comes walking out on the dock and Vera sees him, she's completely caught off guard when he shoots her in the face with a spear gun. And adding that reveal in the third act just made Richard Brooker's Jason even more terrifying to me, and rose the stakes in the third act exponentially. So for all these Shelley haters out there, if it wasn't for him, Jason never gets his hockey mask. So let's give Shelley a little bit of respect. And as I said before, Frank Mancuso Jr. and his father would decide to shoot the film in 3D, and the reason behind that was to enhance the audience experience and ultimately generate a higher audience attendance for theaters around the country. And Part 3 will be the first film to use the Marks 3D system, and this made filming very difficult and twice as long. And did it really enhance the experience? Yes and no. There are a lot of scenes that's honestly, the 3D's kind of useless. It's got a lot of long shots with close-ups of stuff going into the camera like this, and it's not really relevant to the movie, and it doesn't really enhance the movie at all. They usually use it for stuff like broom handles going in there where people are moving stuff around, or a character's juggling, or someone's got a yo-yo and it's going down towards someone's face, or even the scene where popcorn's popping all up into the screen. And for me, that is just doesn't enhance the experience at all, and it's kind of a waste of time. But it does help out with some really, really good kills. One of the things that it really is utilized good for, other than the kills, is the opening credits popping off of the screen. I thought that was absolutely freaking awesome, and might be one of the best opening credit scenes in the franchise. So ultimately, I do think that overall, the 3D is kind of pointless, but when it is used correctly, it is incredible. And to launch off of that great opening credit scene, I want to commend Harry Manfredini and Michael Zager for giving us probably the best opening credit scene of the franchise when it comes to the music as well. The disco theme of this is definitely a fan favorite, and definitely one of my favorite openings of the franchise. It is absolutely incredible. It's real dancey, and it's just really cool, and it's become super iconic to the point that there are bands that play this live out in bars in LA and stuff when they're having their Friday the 13th celebrations. They take some elements of the original theme and score and lace it with those disco elements that are real spooky, and then add in the at certain points, and it just, again, it's one of the best of the franchise. And I don't want that to take away from the score, because this score is probably one of the best as well. It takes all the elements from the original, some of the elements from the second film, and it really builds on it. And it does these even longer whining parts of it to where it'll like sustain this crescendo, and then out of nowhere it just hits you in the gut with like a sharp noise or whatnot to signify that shit's popping off. And this really helps build this real spooky atmosphere, particularly in the final act. I absolutely love how Harry Manfredini could continue to take that original score and build on it and make each score individually different in each film. And it just continues to make it fresh every single time. There are two particular kills where the 3D was really utilized well, and the kills are, to my opinion, all-timers in this franchise. Rick, played by Paul Kropka, meets his fate when Jason grabs him outside, holds his head together, and crushes it. And when he's crushing the head, the eye pops out towards the screen. And you could see a little bit of the wires and stuff of how they did this, but it's still charming and it's still awesome. And they achieved this by having Jason crush a mold of Paul's head, and at the right time the crew would pull this string which would pop out the eye, and it would be sent on a wire that's heading straight at the camera, giving it that effect of the eye popping out at the camera. But I think the one in particular that is the best of this movie is the spear gun kill. And I talked about it before, when Catherine Park's character Vera is down by the lake and she drops Shelley's wallet. She's in the water and she looks up and she sees Jason on the dock and she's like, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" And he pulls the gun and he shoots, and the spear goes right into her eye and her body just falls into the lake. And I thought that was so freaking cool, and especially how they achieved it. Similar to the head crushing kill, they have the spear traveling on a wire heading straight towards the camera. And right when the spear is about to hit the camera, they cut to her head and the spear going into the mold of Catherine Park's head, and then her body just falling in the water. And that kill is fucking awesome. It's one of the best of the franchise. Then there's this one scene where Chris, the final girl, plants an axe in Jason's head, and it's all 3D, and he's coming at the camera kind of giving you Chris's point of view. And to me, that was very, very effective in giving the audience that point of view scare that Chris is seeing Jason reaching for while he has this axe planted in his skull. And then we probably have the most unbelievable dream sequence of the entire franchise, where Jason is up in the cabin and Chris is in a boat, very similar to the first film. And Chris wakes up, sees Jason in a window up in the cabin. He runs out the door, knocking the door off the hinges, and right when he is coming towards the water, she's trying to get away. She looks back and he's gone. And then out of nowhere, the corpse, the rotting, snake-infested corpse of Pamela Voorhees comes out of the water and drags Chris down into the water. And to me, that is the best looking dream sequence that we have gotten so far. And there's a couple things that stand out as bad. One in particular is the franchise itself at this point has a really bad problem with bad characters that are there just to be cannon fodder. And then it also has characters that are just really bad actors and are not good in their role. And as we transverse the Friday the 13th universe and through this franchise, I'm going to be pointing out some of the notably bad characters. There are a few characters that stand out and seem to be very out of place and don't really serve any purpose. There's a point in the movie where this biker gang is introduced, and that biker gang is literally just there to die. They get presented at first to be part of a conflict that the group is going to have to deal with, and then they are just unceremoniously killed off one by one in a very, very quick scene. And then there are two characters, Chili, played by Rachel Howard, and Chuck, played by Dave Cattens, that are in the group, and they are completely out of place. They're like these two hippie characters that are like, they seem like they're 15 years older than everybody here, and they just really sit around, smoke pot, and have no purpose whatsoever throughout the movie. And maybe they were added just to adhere to the slasher formula, but I can say without a shadow of a doubt that this is absolutely the first time that we have gotten two egregious characters that were literally there just to pad the body count. And to add insult to injury, we probably have one of the worst scenes of acting in the entire franchise. And that is saying a lot, because the character of Chili, when she discovers Shelly's body, or when Shelly walks in damn near lifeless with his throat slit, and like slumps down dead in the kitchen, and she thinks it's just a prank, and then she realizes that he's actually dead. She goes on this ridiculous, horrendous tirade where she's going through the house, up the stairs, into the bathroom, into the bedrooms, back downstairs, and the whole time she's like, Shelly's dead, Shelly's dead, oh, Shelly's dead. And then she ends up meeting her fate by Jason when he shoves a red hot fire poker through her chest. And even her death is bad, where she's like, if I had to say right now, going back through this franchise, who is the worst actress and the worst performance of the entire franchise, it might be Chili. And this might be kind of weird, but I'm going to say it anyway, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. But this might be the first time I've seen in a movie where characters go to the bathroom and they don't wipe. They just get up and leave. And the one scene in particular that happens, there's not a scare going on or anything. The dude just gets up, he hears noise and he gets up. And he doesn't wipe, he just pulls his damn pants up and goes. And it's like, dude, you got mud butt. Do something about that. And then another time in the movie, this happens twice. There's a time where I believe it's Chuck's character. He goes out to this outhouse and someone's rattling the outhouse while he's in there. And he gets up and doesn't wipe and just goes about his business. And I know that that might be a minor gripe and everything, but once you notice it, you can't unnotice it. But Friday the 13th Part 3 3D would be another trendsetter, another milestone entry in the franchise, because it would gross $36.7 million off a $2.2 million budget, making it one of the most successful entries in the franchise. And it would kick off the 80s like 3D craze too, where 3D was back and you would get multiple 3D adaptations of movies like Jaws 3, Amityville 3 3D, Parasite. I think there was one called Rottweiler. Like, all these movies would start utilizing this Mark's 3D system, and it really kicked off like a trend. And something else for it to be proud of is it knocked E.T. from the #1 spot in the box office. That is insane. E.T., one of the most successful films of all time, one of the most beloved films of all time, got knocked out of the box office by Friday the 13th Part 3 3D. That's kind of insane to me. And with all this success, Frank Mancuso Jr. decided that he would announce at the wrap party that this was it. This was the final Friday the 13th movie. But we all know that wasn't true. Friday the 13th Part 3 is a milestone entry in the franchise, giving us a very underrated final girl in Chris Higgins, and finally giving Jason his iconic look with the signature hockey mask. And it has some pretty cool kills with the 3D effect. And it's also remained this fan favorite over the years. For me, it's definitely in my top 5, and one of the most rewatchable entries in the franchise. So Friday the 13th Part 3 3D gets a 4 out of 5. So make sure you grab your copy of Friday the 13th Part 3 on the way out, as well as your 3D glasses. And if you like this video, like it. And if you like it enough, please head over to the channel, hit the subscribe and bell button, and make sure that you never miss a new release. Also, please follow me on all social media pages so that you can get channel updates, movie news, and all forms of badassery. Coming up next, we're going into Friday the 13th, the final chapter, probably the best entry in the entire franchise, at least in my opinion. So remember, until next time, be kind, rewind.